Hello everyone. Today we are gonna be using the new Simulanka cards, and those pieces of trash have me banging my head against the wall because how stupid and annoying they are to use. Well, to continue that rant, we are first gonna get into the games so that you aren't gonna get too bored like either here, so I'll see you in the next, first game. Now we are gonna be using replays once again in order to keep this video on the shorter side, and mostly because I do not want to play more with these Simulanka cards. So, here we luckily have two of the first ones in the hand.
What are my orders?
In my Simulanka journey, my first attempt on using them was in a stall deck. It was Furina, Sitlali and Xingqiu, my first deck I tried to use the Simulanka cards in. Why that trio? Well, because Furina Burst can buff the toy card summons damage, and Sitlali to provide freeze so that the toy cards can, of course, shatter possibly an enemy. And lastly, we have Xingqiu for cleansing, and why not Kokomi but Xingqiu? Well, because I decided that if we are anyway going to use Simulanka summons, our summon will be full, and we already have Furina in the game, so we aren't going to have much room in the summon field if we have more than one summoning character. The end result of that trial run was I learned how the Simulanka cards worked, and goddamn, they are stupid. What you see here, that 4 damage onto the opponent's Wanderer, is probably the best interaction you can get with the toy card. Because throughout my journey of trying to learn these cards, I came to the conclusion you either use the one singular Simulanka card, which is when you create, when you do an elemental reaction, create one of these origami summons. That, I believe it's a companion card. You either use 1 or 2 copies of that and nothing else regarding Simulanka, or you use this combination along with the Constellation Metropole card. Because this combination you see here, this actually does something. You can see it here once again. One toy card, it instantly gets more damage, and the Calligraphy Tavern has it attack twice during the end phase, meaning you basically have 4 damage summon on the field, which is actually pretty good. If it wasn't for the ridiculously limited amount of usage such a summon has. Because once again, the only additional damage you can get for that summon is via Shenhe Burst, which I tried, and with Furina Burst. And shatter reactions, of course, which is, you can see with here my deck, we are trying to get freeze opponent's characters and do the very thing you saw there with the toy cards doing 4 damage in the end phase. That is the whole gimmick of this deck. So, about the rest of the origami summons, let's call them, we have toy cards and we have origami summons to, properly differentiate between the two. Both of them are honestly trash, in my opinion. All the cards, they are trash, apart from the do an elemental reaction and gain 1 Simulanka summon card. That's the only decent card. Everything else is utter trash. That has been my experience with the Simulanka cards. Why, you ask? Because you cannot have multiple of the same Simulanka summon on the field at the same time. You can only have one copy of toy cards. You can only have one flying squirrel, only one hamster, healing hamster, only one toad that draws you cards. The value, you get it so slowly with those cards. It's not even, there are so many better options than Simulanka summons. Like if you want to try Simulanka summons in your deck, only pick like one, maybe two copies of the create an elemental reaction and gain a Simulanka summon, create a Simulanka summon card into your hand. Also, as a side note, in this deck, to get some extra value of playing Simulanka summons, we have end of the line for that extra card draw and little bit of extra damage that it provides. But enough about that, I want to complain more about Simulanka summons. Well, let's save it for the next game, since you can already guess how this game ends. But I'll continue it, definitely.
Falling into the abyss.
So, I told about my first Simulanka deck, which was the Xingqiu Sidlali Furina deck. After that, I did try replacing Xingqiu with Kokomi when I realized that, hold on, your summon will actually not be full all the time because the summons do not stack. Well, that deck, it didn't work any better. If you want to use Simulanka cards in a store deck, only pick one, maybe two copies if you really want to try them out, of the do an elemental reaction and gain a Simulanka summon.
Born of icy frost.
Secondly, I came to the conclusion, if you're playing toy cards, always use Calligraphy Tavern. You saw it in the first game there, but this combo is actually worth something. Because these two cards synergize together. Why? Because Gift of Goddess of Prophecy immediately gives you two toy cards into your hand, and when you play a Simulanka summon, you increase its number of effects by 1. Whereas the Calligraphy Tavern basically just procs your Simulanka summon twice. What that means is that if you have this combo on the field, you instantly get a 4 damage end of the round summon. Of course, you have to first invest a total of 5 dice to get the summon, because you have to play both of these, then play the summon, so that's a 5 dice for a 4 damage summon. But like this combo works, but it's not a good combination. But as a side note, both Calligraphy Taverns and the Gift of Goddess of Prophecies, the effect mentioned can affect the same summon multiple times if you have multiple copies of this card on the field. That is to say, if you have 2 Calligraphy Taverns, they randomly trigger one of your Simulanka summons end phase, even if you only have one summon on the field. If you have 2 taverns, they both activate the same summon. Same goes with the Gift of Goddess and Prophecy. If you have 2 of these or more on the field, the +1 to number of effects, like you saw there, the damage was increased by 1. The +1 procs multiple times for the same summon. That is to say, if you have 2 of the Goddess of Prophecy and you have the Constantine Metropole buff, which you get from doing a burst, you can have a toy card that does 4 damage. And that, I do have to admit, is pretty funny when you do have that on the field. I had it once, unfortunately I deleted the replay that it was in because I was careless in managing my well, replays. Nevertheless, you can get up to a 4 damage, like without any other gimmicks, just having 2 copies of Goddess of Prophecy and Constellation Metropole burst buff effect active. Though you should note that the Constellation Metropole burst buff, that one does not stack. Doing multiple bursts or having multiple Constellation Metropoles does not grant you multiple stacks of their effects, compared to Goddess of Prophecy and Calligraphy Tavern, whose effects do stack. So, now you may wonder, previously I mentioned, if you want to try Simulanka summons, only play the do an elemental reaction and gain, one random Simulanka summon into your hand. Why did I say that you only want to have that one? Well, because how Calligraphy Tavern works. Origami Flying Squirrel gives you a free swap. If you have Calligraphy Tavern, basically it gives you 2 free swaps. The Pop-Up Paper Frog draws you 1 card. If you have Calligraphy Tavern on the field, it draws you 2 cards. But the hamster heals your lowest HP character for 2 HP with only 1 usage.
Give me a moment to compose myself.
Why is that important? It gets no extra value from the Tavern. It gets nothing from this. So why is it a big deal? You wonder. Because the effect that instant activation you saw there, that effect gets wasted if it activates on the hamster. Because the hamster only has 1 usage. So even though you might at first think that, oh, the tavern, that works with the origami summons, while the Metropole works with the toy card summons. Incorrect. Metropole, tavern and toy card summons work together, and then you have the origami summon, gain origami summon on reaction. I don't remember the name of that card. Gain that card works alone. You do not want to have that card along with Calligraphy Tavern unless you are seriously going just doing nothing but playing the summons on the field. I hope you got something out of that rant, but this game here is coming to its end slowly, so we get to the actually somewhat impressive games. You may wonder why am I using like opponents who's, I mean, okay, you can see this game is actually quite close. Well, close and close. They've already used their arcane card, so there basically is no way they can win anymore. But I'm using replays such as these because I simply couldn't get wins against better decks. But there were some exceptions, as you will be seeing soon. Now we are up against a burning deck, which I hope shows some. You can see success against, you know, more meta decks. But I guess I've complained about the cards enough. I've tried to make you understand why I highly dislike these new Simulanka cards. But yeah, the deck we are playing is very simple. You have both Ganyu and Venti simply because they have more HP. You could have Jean as well instead of Venti, but I opted for Venti because, I mean, free swaps from the skill. And the burst is a summon that actually does more damage compared to Jean's burst. Now, I mentioned earlier, if you are playing toy cards, like this deck, this is a toy card deck. I gave up on the origami summons because there are so many better options to use instead of origami summons. But the toy cards, from that you can actually make a deck. I, for example, tried Shenhe Furina Navia deck. Why? Because both Navia and Shenhe can... no, not Navia. Both Furina and Shenhe can buff the damage of the toy card summons as well as Navia's bullets, so you know it was a proper fucking meme deck. I saw no goddamn success with that deck. Admittedly, it was not an amazing deck. But only thing I came to realize from that was that it's not a good idea.
Give me a moment to compose myself.
If you want to use, you either use only the create Simulanka summon via elemental reaction card, or you use Constellation Metropole with Gift of Goddess of Prophecy with Calligraphy Tavern trio, because that trio actually gives you like a decent summon. Constellation Metropole, here you can see the both buffs or effects that the Metropole gives you cannot stack, meaning there's no point having multiple copies of Constellation Metropole. Similar to what other things do not stack? I'm sure. Well, for example, the end of the line bonus damage does not stack. It only gives +1 damage if under the conditions of its inner workings, for example. But to put it simply, only play one copy of Constellation Metropole, because to be honest, you most of the time you only get value from the make your toy card free part, and you get less value from the
Give me a moment to
when you
compose
burst your next toy card gets +1. Also, one thing I dislike about this, it doesn't instantaneously buff a toy card that is already on the field, it only buffs a toy card that you play. Meaning, when you get this buff, you have to play a new toy card to actually have it. You can see there we have the Constellation Metropole buff on the field. Once this dice rolls are over, yep, well, there comes our toy soldiers. This is the one that makes it free to play a toy card. And let me tell you, this would be a great card. It would be great to have the toy cards for free if you could have multiple of them on the field at the same time. But because you cannot, it's goddamn pointless. Simulanka cards, they have immense potential for memes. If you could have multiple of the same summon at the same time. Because you could form a bunch of the healing hamster summons, fill your field with them, end your round, and suddenly you have more healing than Furina plus Furina and Barbara summons together. Same with toy cards. If you could have, like you can see here, because we did a burst with Ganyu, our toy cards have 3 damage. Because the buff from this elemental burst buff here that gains +1 to effects, and then we had the Gift of Goddess of Prophecy there as well. So we have 3 damage toy cards. And like I mentioned, the Gift of Goddess of Prophecy does stack, so this could be actually up to 4 damage just from the Simulanka cards. But yeah, if you could have multiple toy cards on the field, it would actually be funny, because then something like Shenhe Burst would actually make it incredibly funny to have like multiple toy cards and a Shenhe buff, and they do 10 damage in the end phase, and your opponent is just utterly screwed from that. And our opponent gives up, seeing there's little to no hope to win anymore. But the next game may not be quite as good for me. The deck I'm playing is not a good deck. But as you can see, we are playing a freeze deck. What our opponent is playing is the classic Yoimiya Yelan Variotsli deck that usually can be if you have a good freeze deck, it is very easy to counter our opponent's deck. But unfortunately in this game, you can see from my dice, I was doomed from round 1. Because the only way I could beat this matchup is if I could freeze one of their characters. Because they, just as well as they can get Yoimiya burst round 1, they can get Yelan burst round 1. And you can see, the moment they saw me switch character, they knew that it was gonna be infinitely harder for me to actually freeze one of their characters. Which is why, of course, because they would waste dice if they switch to Yoimiya, there's no point doing that, so they are going for Yelan burst here. Well, surprisingly, they do not actually get the full energy, probably some not so lucky with the cards. I mean, we know they have Covenant of the Rock, Arcane God, what else would they use with that deck? But yeah, this match is here only to show that my deck is not a good deck. Oh, this is the one. Forest of Blessings, this is what I was talking about. You either use Constellation Metropole, the Tavern, and the toy card, some Gift of Goddess of Prophecy, that trio, or you use Forest of Blessing 1 or 2 copies of this. I recommend just add 1 or 2 copies of this one if you want to try out the summons. Not recommended if you are playing, let's say, a double Geo deck, unless you are using summons that allow for a guaranteed reaction at the end phase. But yeah, either use only Forest of Blessing or the other 3 Simulanka cards.
Here comes the catch.
Everything else, I tell you, doesn't work. I'm not saying you cannot make it work, but from my experience, it's not gonna be fun. Here you can also see, like, they had Tada for Yelan, they got the Yelan burst, now they played Talent card for Yoimiya. I'm absolutely screwed in this match. Playing the Arcane card because once again I know for sure they have Covenant of Rock. But they decide not to play it here even if they have War Princess active. Probably because they do not have good artifacts to utilize the War Princess on. You know, maybe I'm quite sure they could have gotten at least one shot with Yoimiya there, but it would have simply been pointless. And you know, from there I could have made a Frostlake arrow with Ganyu to kill Yelan, Cryon Yoimiya. That would have been bad for our opponent, but of course they are smart. They went back to Yelan to tank the damage as well, so I was screwed. But yeah, this game is simply to show you that my deck, what I'm playing, this is not a good deck. This was just the deck I had most success with out of the I tried 4 different Simulanka decks. 2 stall decks, 1 complete game deck, and then this one. And this was the one I saw most success with. And I'm not saying maybe someone who puts in the thought and effort comes up with a proper Simulanka deck. There you can see the Covenant of Rock, surprise, surprise, no one. But yeah, you can be for sure, someone will probably show you a Simulanka deck that actually works. And I'm not saying it's impossible. All I'm saying is, from what I played, there are 101 better options available for you. you should not, in my opinion, try to make your deck up out Simulanka cards. You can have, like I mentioned, one or two copies of Forest of Blessing. That's enough. If you really want to try toy card memes, then you get the rest of the 3. Because like this, and this together, that's a good combination for memes. But even still, you can only have one copy of Goddess of Prophecy on the field at the same time. Not one toy card at the field at the same time. That's what I meant. Now our last game against a stall deck, just to show that this deck is horrendous that I'm playing. Yeah, I really was like smashing my head against the wall with these cards. I really tried. But if you think about it, they aren't even... Okay, Melusine Sword decks. That's probably the best way. One copy of Forest of Blessing, add that to your Melusine Sword decks, and that's enough. No more, no less. One copy of that. Alright? And even still, it's probably not good if you're playing Melusine Sword with double Geo and you do not have 2 Geo summons that can guarantee you that elemental reaction. If those conditions aren't fulfilled, I wouldn't use it. Like if you have double Geo without summons, don't bother using the Forest of Blessings with Melusine Sword. But one copy with Melusine Sword is decent. It's gonna be a little slow to get the stacks. You know, there's a maximum of... After all, one Forest of Blessings can give you up to 3 stacks on the Melusine Sword. So it's good to have one copy, but you only get those stacks if you are lucky, because of course you can get the same summon over and over again. Resulting in a situation where the card does not create you any more value than it does via dice tuning. Also in this deck, this match, you get to see what happens when you do not draw the proper cards. Because one thing about this Simulanka summons, or this toy card deck I should call this perhaps, it doesn't work if you do not draw those cards. And because the Gift of Goddess of Prophecy, that is a companion card, so you can use Dunyasar to fish for it. But if you do not have Dunyasar, good luck. And also Constantine Metropole and the Tavern are location cards, and as such, well, as you might know, there is currently no way to fish for location cards from your deck, like you can do with companion cards with Dunyasar, with artifacts with Timaeus, with weapons with Wagner, with food when you have Chef Mao. But there's no such thing for location cards, so there's no way to fish for the tavern. And like I probably didn't mention it, but there's no point in playing Gift of Goddess of Prophecy without the Calligraphy Tavern, because because you can only have one of the same summon at the field at the same time. Also there you got to see we basically wasted the stack of the tavern because the healing hamster would have activated anyway during the end phase. Only difference there was that it activated at the moment we decided to end our round instead of the end phase, which basically at this point of the game there's no real difference. But yeah, as I was saying, there's no point in playing Gift of Goddess of Prophecy alone, because the toy cards have 2 usage. You can only have one toy card and the field at the same time, and this creates 2 toy cards to your hand. Meaning, it takes up to 4 rounds to get full value just from the 2 toy cards you get to your hand via this card, if you do not have the tavern. And 4 rounds is a long time to get value from a singular card. It's not worth it. You want to have the tavern with the Gift of Goddess of Prophecy together, and that's when you want to play the toy card. Because then you actually get the value in a decent time. By the way, in these matches, if you have followed what our opponent is doing, they are getting overconfident. Well, anyway, I think that's enough ranting about. Like, okay, now I think I'm done with the Simulanka cards. I think that should be all I wanted to say about them. If you want to play toy cards, it's this combination, and if you feel like it, one copy of Constellation Metropole. If you want to use the Simulanka origami summons, 1 or 2 copies of the Gifts of a Forest of Blessings. 1 or 2 copies depending on how you feel. Or actually, 1 or 2 copies depending on whether you actually want to rely on the summons, and if you have easy time actually doing reactions. Because after all, if you do not do elemental reactions, you aren't gonna be getting those summon cards to your hand in the first place. But with characters like Mona, Lini, well, Charlotte's skill, what else is there? Well, anything, well, what is it? The Hydro Abyss, Lecter skill, anything that gives you multiple instances of elemental application, those sorts of characters work well with the Forest of Blessing. So yeah. Oh yeah, one last thing I want to complain about the summons. Like I've hopefully made it clear, you can only have one of the same summon at the same time in your field. Why is that the case? Because if you consider other playable summoners, what other playable summons we have? We have Apep's Awaken My Kindred cards. You can have multiple of those in the field at the same time. What else do we have? Well, we have the Monster Resonance card that creates you a random Hillager summon. You can also have multiple of those at the same time, though you can of course have, they are always of different element. I believe if you have like Hydro, Hillager, Samature, I don't know. If you have Hydro summon on the field, you cannot gain another Hydro summon, but it guarantees a different element, I believe, at least. So why is it not the case for these cards? Because toy cards would be a great meme if you could have multiple of them at the same time. But because you cannot, you are basically if you like actually want to get value from the toy cards, you are forced to use Tavern with the Gift of Goddess and Prophecy, and that just gives you too many restrictions to actually achieve greatness. Also here you can see our opponent's overconfidence comes back to bite them a little. They lost Nubliet and the equipment on him. Though of course they can now just freeze my characters. I gotta say, playing this matchup, you see, it was horrendous. A full stall deck, both of their characters with over 10 HP. Of course, Siegewin started with 12 HP, but I believe their Siegewin is currently sitting at 15 max HP at this point in the game, which is ridiculous. Also here you can see the 2 Gifts of Goddess of Prophecy stack, so our toy card had 3 damage without the Constellation Metropole buff being present. So yeah, that effect does stack, and it is indeed the same thing for the Tavern. The proc the end phase can happen twice on the same summon. And also lastly I could mention using People of Spring's location card with the Simulanka summons, in my opinion, not necessary and rather pointless. Simply because you are anyway getting so many summons if you play around them in the first place.
Shouldn't let your guard down.
Once again, our opponent being a little overconfident here, going for a skill instead of just switching or doing a normal attack.
You might feel a little
Especially for this burst, I feel it was really pointless.
Yeah.
think you can get away.
And here you are about to see the biggest stroke of luck I had with these cards, or with this deck, throughout the games I played. As our opponent ends the round feeling rather confident. As you can see, I have End of the Line, which gained 1 stack from playing the toy card, which gives me a seed dispenser, which together with my previous one I can play the Calligraphy Tavern, which does just enough summon damage that we win this game, because they have Bond of Life from their weapon. This was honestly quite the clutch. But yeah, Simulanka cards are fucking awful.